Welcome back to Econ 321, Intermediate Microeconomics. By now, you should have viewed the introductory material to the class. We are going to go ahead and start right now with Chapter 1 in Frank's book. Let's start out with a couple of definitions of economics. Fundamentally, economics is a science of human decision-making. We study how humans make decisions in faces of scarcity and incentives, but it is a human-centered science. And at the end of this, you'll have a set of tools to help analyze problems. Another more formal definition is economics is the allocation of scarce resources. Without scarce resources, there is no need for economics. So let's talk about a couple of resources which are scarce, and they would both affect you very much so as a student. For instance, income can be considered a scarce resource. We have a finite amount of income, and we need to make a decision how we're going to go ahead and spend that income. How do we spend it on one good versus another good, or go ahead and save it? Even if you were the richest person in the world, you would have another very scarce resource, and that would be time. 24 hours in a day, a finite lifetime, at least for now, and so you have to make decisions what you want to do with your life. And so there's choices to be made. You've already made a choice today. You're viewing this lecture, so you went ahead and made a choice to do this. But you could have done many things besides viewing. You could have viewed this lecture. Maybe you could have slept. Maybe you're doing this early in the morning. Or maybe you could have been out playing hockey. You had lots of choices to make. The choice you made this time might not be the choice you made next time, or might not be a choice another student makes in the class. And there's incentives. The incentive for this, viewing this lecture right now, one of them would be, of course, you may be interested in learning the material. Maybe you want to pass the class because it's a prerequisite for getting a degree. Maybe it's both those things. Maybe it's more. So there's incentives which lead you to make choices in the face of scarcity. Economics is not the only discipline that studies human decision-making. Many disciplines do, such as sociology, psychology, religious studies, even hard sciences such as chemistry and physics. You can look at human decision-making in those contexts. But economics, how the economics differs from those other disciplines is this scarcity, choices, and incentives. And most of the problems we view will be viewed in light of those three things. As you can read in your textbook in the first chapter, fundamental to decision-making economics is cost-benefit analysis. So let's go through an example. Let's say you're deciding if you should get married or not. Should I marry John or Jane Doe? So we're going to go ahead and define X as an activity. In this case, the activity is, are you going to marry John or Jane Doe? Let's let B of X be a function. So B of X is the benefit of doing activity X. C of X is the cost of doing activity X. And so the question is the benefit of doing activity X, does it outweigh the costs? And so you can make a list of benefits and costs. So let's just think of some benefits and costs of being married. Certainly a benefit of being married is companionship. Of course, you can have companionship without being married. You could be friends. You could live together, whatever you want. But that might be one benefit. Maybe stability. Maybe it's because it's custom. Maybe there's religious reasons. So you could think of a whole list, and these lists of benefits of being married will be different to different people. It also could be that some of these benefits are costs. Maybe for some people, stability is a cost. You might be the person that really likes to go out and just have a good time. You might not want stability. So a benefit for one person could be a cost for another. Okay, but what are the other costs? Well, the other costs are, let's see, money. Money could also be a benefit if you share resources, and maybe you'll be spending money on things you wouldn't normally spend money on. How about boredom? You might get bored with one person. How about if you marry one person and you only believe in marrying one person at once, you go ahead and decide to marry Jane, that means you can't marry Sally. You cannot marry Sally. And so forth. So you can think of all sorts of possible, benefits and costs that will differ for different people. Some people will go ahead and decide to get married, and some people will go ahead and not decide to get married, or maybe delay the decision to sometimes later. The cost-benefit rule is rather simple. If the benefit of doing activity X is greater than the cost, you do X. Otherwise, you do not. And that is the most powerful rule in all of economics. So let's go ahead and talk about this a bit more. You have an activity X, you define it. It might be getting married, it might be viewing this lecture, brushing your teeth, buying a car, whatever it happens to be. If the benefits of doing that activity outweigh the costs, economists will say you will do it. Otherwise, you will not do that. A corollary to this rule is that if you do not do X, you're doing something else. And here we say that you're implicitly choosing the next best alternative. In this case, we're going to call this Y. So the opportunity cost, and this is maybe the most famous term in all of economics, the opportunity cost of doing X is what you have to give up. What you're giving up is you're not able to do Y. So if you marry Jane, you don't marry Sally, and so forth. Okay, we can also state that if this information is not perfect, you're making a choice based on your perceived benefits and costs. And there's a whole branch of economics that has to do with information. So the definition I like of opportunity cost is that the opportunity cost is the value of your next best alternative. Frank has a slightly different one in this book, and it's actually just the same thing, but it's the opportunity cost is the value that must be sacrificed to do an activity, the value of everything that must be sacrificed. And that is really a key. It is, when you do one activity, the opportunity cost is everything you give up to do that activity. This definition says the same thing because it's the value of your next best foregone alternative. It's what you gave up to do that activity. And you can only really give up one thing at a time. We can talk about explicit costs. Explicit costs are out-of-pocket costs. Those are easy. You buy an apple, it's 75 cents or whatever. But many costs are implicit, such as you marry Jane, you give up the opportunity to marry Sally. Well, that cost is what the value of marrying Sally would have been, because that's what you have given up. So let me go through a problem beginning problem I give to a graduate class sometime. And the problem goes like this. This will test your understanding of opportunity costs. You have the option of doing a thesis on the economics of halibut farming and choosing me as your major advisor. So we'll call that choice X. Your next best alternative is to do a thesis on carbon sequestration for Dr. Greenberg, Josh Greenberg, who's a friend of mine, and another economist. The following describes absolutely everything that will affect your decision. Many times when we present problems, they're fairly simplistic to get a point across. You can think of other things, but when I give you a problem, only the things in the problem are going to affect the solution. So here's some parameters. The stress you incur of working for Josh is valued at $500. So if you work for Josh, you will have damages of about $500 because of stress. We can talk later about how you come up with these numbers. But you also enjoy working for Josh, and you can value that at $2,000. Your thesis, if you work under Josh, is valued at $8,500. And that's down here in the last line. Okay, if you work for me, the stress you will incur is $5,000. But you also will enjoy working for me, I hope. Enjoyment is worth $3,000, and your thesis valued, if you work for me, is $10,000. So let's say that you knew all of this. The question is, will you work for me, X, or will you do your next best alternative, and that is work for Josh, Y? So let's go ahead and go through these one by one. The activity X is working for me. The stress that you incur of working for Josh is valued at $500. If you work for me, you don't have to work for Josh. So you have a benefit of working for me, and that is you don't have to incur the stress of working for Josh. So that's a benefit. Your enjoyment of working for Josh is $2,000. But if you work for me, you don't work for Josh, and so you're going to give up that enjoyment of $2,000. Your thesis, valued if you work for me, is going to be worth $10,000. So if you work for me, your thesis will be worth $10,000. Your enjoyment of working for me is $3,000. So by working for me, you get $3,000 in enjoyment. The stress that you incur working for me, however, is $5,000. So that's going to be a cost. And your thesis of working under Josh is $8,500. If you do your thesis under me, you give up the opportunity to do your thesis under Josh. So that's an opportunity cost of $8,500. All of these costs are opportunity costs. So let's add them up. The total sum of benefits of working for me, the benefits of X, equals $13,500. The cost of working for me is going to be $15,500. So the benefit is not greater than the cost. And so you're not going to work for me. You're going to do your next best alternative, and that is to work for Josh. So even though, and this is a pretty interesting thing, part of fundamental economic analysis, even though your thesis is worth more, if you work for me, that may not be your choice, because there's other things in life besides just the value of your output. So going back to this example, and wiping the slate clean here of the values that we imputed, you might say this is not realistic, because it would be extremely hard to come up with these values. But your thought process may go like this. Boy, working for Dr. Herman, I could really get a good thesis out. I can get a good thesis out working for Josh too. But the one for Dr. Herman might be just slightly better. But he's really a pain in the neck, and I'm going to have a lot of stress working for him. I just don't think I can take it. I'm going to work for Josh. I'll still have a good thesis, but I will enjoy myself more. That's the kind of thought process you would go through. Economists, though, would try to put values to these certain aspects of this to try to figure out how you came up with this. Your decision may be made not even consciously thinking about this. However, in the case of, say, if you're going to marry someone, you may really think of costs and benefits and do a long, type of study on it. If you're doing something like deciding if you're going to brush your teeth in the morning, everything's done very quickly. But we still look at everything as benefit-cost analysis. So we view humans as making these decisions every day. And a good example that a lot of people use is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan uses the law of physics and angles when sinking a jump shot, or he used to when he used to play basketball. Or Buster Posey does it when he hits a curveball. But they may not know anything explicitly about the law of physics, but deep down inside they understand many parts of it.